level, and touching on many of the issues that we're all here really to discuss, which is how to better communicate, and also, on youth engagement. I think we all recognize how important that is, and how we can really all come together to ensure that the young people who want to get engaged and who need to be engaged, and they all do, can really become more effective in their actions and their movement. And then we're going to want to touch a little bit on the legal aspects too. We just had somebody at our last meeting Saturday at the United Nations talking from the Earth Law Center. If you have never heard of the Earth Law Center, check them out. They represent nature legally. And it is such a wonderful, wonderful organization, and they're having some major wins in a lot of places. So, this is all part of the discussion here as well, of being all together, all one, all with nature. So I want to ask Heather now to share a little bit about her story, about what led her to really give up this wonderful career she had, and commit herself to climate, and what she's looking for in making investments in climate-oriented solutions, and how we can look to that to get economic gain.
Yeah, thank you. I first just want to make a little plug, actually, from the last panel that we had, just because we talked a lot about being a guardian. I'm actually an executive producer on a film that's currently out called We Are Guardians, that Leonardo DiCaprio is also an executive producer on. It's a stunning film about an indigenous community that is protecting the Amazon in Brazil, and they just got distribution rights here in the United States. And so I think, what I'm here to represent on this panel is the investment perspective. We talked about education, which is super important. I actually went back to school after a career in the investment world for about 20 years and got a degree in environmental management at Duke. A lot because I think that this problem is incredibly intersectional, right? Even the way that we talk about it based on our background, if you think about if we're looking at it from a policy perspective, or we're looking at it from an education perspective, or we're looking at it from an investment perspective, we're using different words. And so it was really important to me to go back into the investing community and be able to use more science-led terms and think about investing in climate solutions in a more science-based framework. So my background, as I mentioned before, prior to launching ScopeFour, was in the pretty traditional investment world, and a lot of people began to ask the company that I was at, it was called First Eagle, about how we were addressing climate change, both from an opportunity and also from a risk standpoint. And a lot of you, I'm sure, have investment portfolios, and you want to be able to invest with your dollars, and you don't quite know how. And probably if you have a financial advisor, they don't really know how either. And that's because most investment professionals haven't been trained on climate, and they haven't really been trained on sustainability in a verifiable way. And so I think a lot of the investment community is still very much feeling around in the dark. So when I talk about investing in climate solutions, I think about it in exactly this way. There are companies that are doing the most harm, and those are, probably a lot of the oil and gas companies in the world that we think of, the highest emitters. And there are companies that are doing less harm. And we talked a little bit about Microsoft and Amazon. Those are companies that are committing to net zero. And then there are companies that are actually solving the problem. And so those are the types of companies that we're investing in. And because there's been such a growth in the desire to invest dollars in the climate solution, just to give you a sense, there are actually 5,000 public companies that have committed to net zero, in addition to 240 countries now, up from 5 years ago. The velocity of the commitment has been incredible. And I know that obviously we've pulled back here in the United States, and we're so United States centric that it feels like the rest of the world is doing that. But in fact, the rest of the world is actually pushing forward. And just to give you an example, Japan actually has a green economic plan where they're dedicating about $1 trillion right now to the green economy. So something that you just referenced, which is a huge deal. They're really focused, for example, on train electrification. And their VC community is actually really thriving. They're very focused on also creating more climate solutions. And I'm going to be talking a little bit later, so I don't want to talk too late. And I know that we're way over time, but maybe I'll just give an example of a company in our portfolio.
Yeah, do it.
Okay. So we invest in public companies, not private companies. So we invest in the stock market. And the reason that I do that is because that's where I think that climate solutions have the ability to scale. An example of a company in our portfolio is Hitachi, which if any of you know that company, you think to yourself, oh, it's kind of an old industrial company. That doesn't really sound like a climate solution to me. But in fact, they now have about $8 billion in R&D dedicated to climate solutions, and anything from train electrification to also drone afforestation, which is basically where drones are planting trees, to wind blade recycling. I'm sure a lot of you, we talk a lot about renewable energy as being a huge part of the answer, but where are these wind blades going? They're oftentimes being buried in the desert. And so we do need to be thinking about things like the circular economy, especially with the green economy and sustainability. So I'll just pause there and.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, please. Yeah, it's awesome. This is the kind of thing, right, that we need. And what I'm a big fan of is I'm a big fan of the 7 Habits, Stephen Covey, right? Everybody, right? And one of the biggest is to synergize. And so part of collaboration is exactly that. And what you realize is that the more you begin doing that, the faster you solve problems, the faster things develop. And I think that's the ability here, is that we're able to start really pulling all of this together to where it ends up at the economic model. All of the initiatives are great, but they end up with an economic model, which is what Tom's presentation ultimately really was. That we have to do this, if for nothing else, because the cost is so great not to. And so, Tom, I'm going to ask you, what are, in your view, and everybody's here to figure out how we can all move things forward. How can we make a difference in our own lives, but also in working together collaboratively? What would be 1 or 2 things that you would recommend needs to happen, or that everybody here should be thinking about getting involved in order to help move things forward?
Oh, sure. I'll give you 1, because that's easier than 2. One idea that I think is extremely powerful is the simple idea of talking to your friends and neighbors about climate. You probably all understand that that's prohibited in the current American culture. You're not allowed to do it. It's considered offensive to people. But, be a little bit gutsy, get out there and take some risk, and pick your targets, but talk to people about climate. What will happen when you do that is you'll make some mistakes along the way, but you'll be learning, and you'll be getting better and better about it. And more important than just you learning, your friends will be learning, and they will have the opportunity to get better and better. So if you do the simple thing of talking to your friends and neighbors about climate, what will happen is, at some point in time, you will have an irresistible political movement that the politicians cannot defy. So that's my advice. Win the game by going out and talking to your friends and neighbors.
Awesome. All right. Terrific. And I want to ask Sarwat a question about youth engagement. Sarwat herself has just a couple of wonderful kids, very active, high school and a graduate student at UCI. And I want to ask you, Sarwat, you're seeing that we have a lot of young people coming in and wanting to be a part of our organization as well. What in your view are some of the things that we can all be doing to encourage more youth engagement and really help our young people become more engaged and active and effective in this movement?
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, there are like two aspects, right? I talk to my students at UCI, and you see some of the students are actually suffering from climate anxiety, right? There's so much happening and they're not sure how they can get involved. And that's why it's really important that they can, get involved in their own chapters, like the United Nations Association. Orange County, we have a UCI chapter, and we are developing more chapters in the high schools and things like that. And, and this is where they can talk about SDGs and the impacts that are specific on climate change, specific on biodiversity targets that can be taken, and giving them this opportunity to be involved, and also supporting their movement towards going to the policy making processes, right? So if there's an opportunity to go to the UN in New York to attend participations where the youth delegates are welcome, like from UNA, we are trying to do that, support our students to go, but it doesn't have to be in New York or Washington, D.C. It can happen also locally, and similar to what we just heard. So taking local action, being involved, and encouraging students to be involved is really important, and talking to them about issues. We in our campus, we are also thinking about doing like climate therapy. This is a real term that, I just came aware of a few years ago, right? But this is a, very specific niche area where you talk about climate change issues, but how you can contribute in a positive way. So there are tools there. It's really important that our youth do not become disillusioned, but look into images like Greta Thunberg and all of these climate champions, but also become champions in their own locality, recycling, doing smaller activities that can help their environment, taking steps at home, in community, locally, then moving nationally.
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome. Okay, great. I see that. I will put a challenge out to the group, which is that one of the things we're in our climate team, which, by the way, some of the thing was mentioned, every Tuesday morning, 9 o'clock, many of us, whoever's in the climate team, raise your hand if you are part of this call regularly. You're all welcome to join anybody that wants to be a part of that, our discussion to not only solve global problems, but local, and look at climate action plans and all kinds of good things. Feel free to hit me up and I'll give you the link, and you're welcome to share. But one of the challenges that we have is young people today want to be involved in projects. They want to be engaged in projects where they're actually seeing some outcome of what they're doing, some results of their efforts. How can we organize a more effective way to enable young people to really do that, both on a larger scale level as well as on a local level? So think about that. I'd love your ideas and thoughts. I have a bunch, but would love your ideas. So Heather, I want to ask you a question on investing. Many folks here, how many here are have a company or are looking for investment for solutions? All right, quite a few. So for these folks, what as somebody who's investing in climate solutions, what are some of the key things that you tend to look for or encourage companies to be mindful of when advising them on having solutions that can become really fundable?
I just want to. I have an idea for the education. There's an organization called Grades of Green. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but it's in my community. But it's also national and local, and I encourage you to check it out. It's all about educating students around that. Awesome. In terms of what we're looking for, we actually look for a really specific impact measurement in a company, which is emission reduction potential. I don't think that metric is used enough, particularly in the financial world. I'm actually an advisor to an organization called Row Impact, and they have a database of all of the climate solutions out there. And which solutions would actually have a greater impact than others because they're not all created equal, right? So if you have $100 that you want to allocate to climate solutions, and this is what I think, and part of why I launched this firm is that there's such a misallocation of capital that's going on today. Things look super sexy and they're like, oh, I'm going to suck carbon out of the atmosphere like a vacuum, and that makes sense, and I'm going to just give $100 to that. And I mean, the truth is right now that carbon capture and storage, in my opinion, while can be part of the solution, is not really economically viable enough to scale, right? And there are all these other technologies out there that are currently economically viable where they don't really need subsidies and they are ready to scale. And so I would highly recommend that you think about, is this climate solution, if I'm going to invest in it, right? It's not a philanthropic dollar. You might want to put your philanthropic dollars towards things like peatland rewetting or forest land protection, right? Or things like that, because unfortunately right now, we don't have externalities, like nature doesn't really have a price on it at the moment, right? And so that's more dedicated to philanthropic dollars. But things like solar, utility scale solar, actually has a huge economic benefit today, and you could argue more so even than oil and gas. And it has emission reduction potential, which is its impact, that's higher than a lot of other things. And so things like reducing food waste, what emission reduction impact does that have versus like offshore wind, for example. And so I think all of those things matter. And another resource that I would highly recommend that augments a lot of what Dr. English was talking about, that really dives into climate solutions, is called Project Drawdown. Actually on the advisory board for a new module that they're putting out called the Explorer. And it literally has identified 100 different climate solutions that, if scaled, would solve this problem. And when I read it, I was so inspired. I was like, why are we not investing in this way, right? And so it's a table side book. It's a nonprofit organization, and it's also a really comprehensive website that if you want to educate yourself on, okay, does this have an impact, that I think could be helpful.
Awesome. We just got the 5-minute notice, but I wanted to just open it up for questions from the audience. Does anybody have any particular questions for either Dr. English or anybody else on the panel, based on what's been discussed or presented? Yeah, in the back. Yes. Climate trace, yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
just because that's relatively new, and that
Yeah.
I think is a great, great tool to have at
Agreed.
our fingertips. It's
Agree,
the
yeah.
Al Gore's,
Climate trace?
Climate Trace, TRACE. So
Yeah, you can go online and it basically shows you emissions. It's one of the most comprehensive sites to show emissions in your area or a community or whatever. So that data is very valuable. And one of the things that our main goal as a chapter, United Nations Association chapter, is to create a digital dashboard that is going to actually pull data together for climate, to have better climate awareness. So kind of a climate dashboard looking at energy usage and also emissions. And Climate Trace would be, one of the main sources that we're going to want to work with there. Yes, sir.
Dave, I'd like to comment on that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah.
Comment, and then we'll take a question.
Your question is really important. The success that California had in air quality was in overcoming their lack of knowledge of their emissions inventory. They just didn't know what things emitted what. And they didn't know how to put money out so you got biggest bang for your buck, okay? So this climate trace activity that Al Gore and his friends have put together gives us an opportunity to be much more efficient in creating an understandable emissions inventory so that we can take actionable action based on that. So yeah, go for that.
We actually used Climate Trace when we established our taxonomy. But just to be clear, Climate Trace isn't about the solutions, it's about the problem,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So it says, okay, X percentage of emissions are coming from oil and gas versus agriculture versus mining, so on and so forth.
But we need to know about that in order to solve the problem. So I think we have time for one more, and I'm going to ask over here, I believe we have it, the question. Yes, sir.
Yo tengo una pregunta para ustedes. Primera pregunta es, sabemos que en el último convención del cambio climático que van a hacer en Belén, en Brasil, y que con esa convención se termina discusión del cambio climático. ¿Y después qué va a pasar? Y otra pregunta es, no es una pregunta, es una reflexión. Para nosotros enfrentar, para equilibrar el cambio climático, no solamente tenemos que buscar en inversiones, en dinero, no tenemos que pensar así, sino tenemos que dar un espacio a la naturaleza, a la tierra, para que comience a equilibrar solo. Eso nada más, gracias.
So his question is, he has like two questions, and one is that after the last UN conference, what happens after that? And we have to like keep talking after that because it's an issue that never ends. And then his second question is that, or it's more like a statement, I would say, is more about how change goes beyond inversion, and it's not only based on money, but also on the community and lifestyles, and that it goes beyond what money can do because money has a limit, but change doesn't have a limit.
Yeah, 100%. And I know Greg is very committed to the interdevelopment goals that the UN also has been promoting, which, to be honest, I was unaware of until Greg brought that up. And I think we're all into, personal transformation as well. So I would encourage us all to learn more about that. But that is part of what Greg's purpose is with all of this as well. And so I think we totally agree with that point. On the COP issue, Sarwat, do you want to talk?
No, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, it's really important to be, like the last two COPs were like in Baku, Azerbaijan, and Dubai, like really oil producing countries, right? And now we are going to Belém, and hopefully this will be a different COP. And it will be a tough one, but yeah, it's really, people are also very hopeful for that. I did want to kind of go back to the question about climate trace and, there are different frameworks available, like the donut economy, planetary boundaries, right? There are different frameworks that can help us understand how we limit pollutions, extract, less natural resources, and living in harmony with the nature while creating economic opportunities for people so they have a minimum living lifestyle, right? So though there are different frameworks available, but it's also important to be mindful of the term that I talked about, greenwashing and false solutions. A lot of NGOs and indigenous groups and non-profit groups talk about that, and Heather just brought that, climate capture and storage. It's not economically viable. So if we're, so to educate ourselves which solutions actually make sense and which solutions are greenwashing and not viable. So, but there are a lot of resources out there, including from the UN, to educate ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just say that on the COP, I think a lot of people get frustrated a little bit because, you can't snap your fingers and fix it. But we know that's not the way it works. And there isn't a better vehicle than that vehicle right now to pull everybody together. And everybody has made commitments. The commitments that Sarwat talked about, the national commitments, they matter, and we all need to be held to account for that, and that's part of our job, is to hold everybody to account for their commitments. And in general, what Tom has found out is that most everybody is on track. The world is on track. we're not so much there, right? And we need to be better. But all of this is making a difference. And so, again, we just have to believe that the effects of synergy and of all coming together, and frankly, AI can become a part of this as well, can really help stimulate a lot of movement here.
And AI can also be part of the problem.
It can be, and so we got to
we
deal
can
with
talk
that.
about.
Anyways, thank you all so much. Thanks for your attention. I want to thank my wonderful panelists here, and thanks for these great presentations. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Just a couple of comments. Dave talked about equal actions that students can take. Our organization will be working after this with Big Sunday and with LA Works, who has a table back there, to mobilize people to do equal actions. So if you want to be part of that, let us know. The QR code that's on your desk wasn't working earlier. It is now working again. That's important because if you use it, you can register to get a free copy of this, my favorite book ever, which I've read cover to cover 5 times, which some of the stories I've read 20 times. The only way to get a free copy is to use that QR code and give us some feedback through that message. And then Cynthia Kersey is the author of that. She can sign it for you if you get a copy today. Third, there's purple handkerchiefs on your table. I wear mine in solidarity with the indigenous folks in the room. I would encourage you to please wear that. If you want to wear it around your head, very cool. Or just put it around your wrist, and then either way, that's just to show solidarity. So thanks very much for that. It's the point that I don't want to gloss over here is the time it's going to get worse before it gets better. I think somebody mentioned 130 degrees. I think that was Sarwat. 130 degrees around the world, that's unbearable, right? We need to avoid that. We need to transform our lives. And to the extent that Sia also mentioned, or maybe Dave mentioned, that we can eradicate poverty. This is, I think, maybe 20 years ago, it was unthinkable to be able to do that, but I think now that we have the tools to do that, and that's what we need to aim for. So thanks very much.